Welcome back. Well, today's book is another Bible story, a true story about Jesus and his disciples. Let's read. The Storm That Stopped, written by Allison Mitchell, illustrated by Catalina Echeverri. Allison Mitchell is a senior editor at the Good Book Company with over 30 years' involvement in training children and youth leaders, as well as being author of numerous children's books and reams of Sunday school kids' materials. Catalina is a freelance illustrator specializing in children's books. She studied graphic design and children's book illustration in Milan, Italy, and Cambridge, England. Originally from Bogota, Colombia, she now lives in London, England. One day, long ago, Jesus was teaching people by the sea. Soon, some more people arrived. Then others. Then more and more, until there were people everywhere. "We can't hear back here." "Give me some more room." "Be quiet. I can't see." The crowds were just too big. No one could see Jesus, and no one could hear Jesus. So Jesus asked his friends, the disciples, to push their boat out into the water. He sat in the boat, and a huge crowd spread out along the beach. Now they could all see and hear Jesus as he told them all about God. When he finished teaching the people, Jesus said to his friends, "Let's go over to the other side of the sea." Jesus had finished teaching the crowd, and now he had something to teach his friends. But they didn't know it yet. So they all jumped in the boat with him and set sail across the sea. Jesus was so tired. He'd been teaching the people all day. So he lay down in the back of the boat and fell fast asleep. It was a quiet evening. The water gently lapped against the boat, and the sun slowly set in the sky. Jesus was sleeping. The disciples were quietly talking. Then, all of a sudden, they were in the middle of the biggest, loudest, scariest, most ginormous storm you could imagine. The wind blew hard. The waves grew huge. The water poured into the boat. But Jesus was asleep. The wind blew harder. The waves grew huger. The water filled the boat. But Jesus was still asleep. "Jesus, wake up, wake up. We're drowning. Don't you care?" What a silly thing to say to Jesus. Of course he cared. He loved his friends so much that one day he was going to die for them. Jesus stood up in the boat. The wind was still blowing. The waves were bigger than ever. The water was pouring into the boat quicker than the disciples could tip it out again. The boat was sinking. I think the windometer, the waveometer, and the sinkometer, and the panicometer are at 70%. major panic attack. Ah! But then Jesus did something amazing. He didn't help his friends pour the water out of the boat. He didn't help them try to row back to land. Jesus simply spoke. But he didn't speak to the disciples. He spoke to the storm, to the wind, and to the waves. Quiet. Be still. Just 3 little words, and the storm stopped right away. At that very moment, the sea was quiet, still, and calm. Then Jesus looked at his friends. "Why are you so afraid? Do you still not trust me?" But they were terrified, and they asked each other, "Who is this? Even the waves and wind do what he says." This was what Jesus wanted to teach them. He wanted them to know who he really is. The disciples already knew a lot about God from his special book, what we call the Old Testament. They knew that God made everything. He made the world, he made the sun and the moon and the stars, and he made the sea and the wind as well. They knew that only God can tell the sea what to do, that only God can tell the wind when to blow or the waves when to crash. Only God can do those things. But the disciples have just seen Jesus do the same things God can do. So, what is the answer to their question? Who is Jesus? Jesus is God. So how do we know about the storm that stopped? Well, the account of Jesus calming this storm was written down in the Gospel of Mark, which is in the New Testament part of our Bibles. You will find it in Mark chapter 4, verses 35 to 41. And at the end of this true story, the disciples do ask each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." And at this point, they still haven't figured out who Jesus is. The rest of Mark's book shows us the answer to their question. Jesus is able to do things that only God can do. How? Because Jesus is Israel's Messiah, the Son of God. The end. So, come back next week and let's have another story. Bye-bye.